Okay, good everybody. So I am really hoping that you get to see this because at the moment I'm using my phone to check out the questions so I can give you the answers. And this is the phone that's connected to the internet. We still haven't got internet in the building, and I just noticed right then that the lead-in was a bit upset. So I rang Jane and asked her, so, hey, listen, we're going to do this, and she said it should be fine because I can't get the internet in the building. So I'm hopefully going to see a comment pop up in a minute and say, yeah, you can hear me and see me, because I don't want to give all these answers and have nothing happening. Anyway, straight into it. So I've got 16 comments, so it shouldn't questions, so it shouldn't take too long. First one's from John Pinto, and just going through his calculations on what the actual speed over the ground might be based on the GPS positions on the tracker points when you get 4 hours in between. And we checked that, and that is correct. So basically, without going into it in too much detail, when the 4 hourly positions are fixed, the speed between those two positions is actually worked out as course over the ground. So it does give you the relevant speed. And it's not just speed as a vector made good or velocity made good on the course, which actually can show up on the leaderboard. So you do actually occasionally see a negative speed, but the speed you're seeing in the box on the way is actually speed over the ground based on the two previous, based on the distance between the 2 points on the way through. So that's an interesting one. John Russell, what happens if a boat doesn't make it to the Cape Town? Oh, we just mentioned that. In time for the start of the next leg, and I'm not seeing any comments there. If anyone's watching, can you just put a comment in and say, yep, you can hear me and see me before I go too far? I just mentioned that the reality is I'm not seeing anyone there. I see 15 people watching, but no one's commenting. Anyway, the reality is if you've got two different boats that might have arrived, say, a day after the start, technically, Jane's there. Okay, we've got connection. So two boats, they arrive late for the restart by a day, and we would look at the reason why they're late, even though the notice of race says that if you don't arrive within 4 hours of the start, you're probably knocked out of the event. We would look at the facts that caused them to be late, and because of that, we would then decide what we'd do. If it was a situation where we believe the boat was fast enough and the crew was capable, so even though they got to stop another 3 days, they can actually then still carry on and catch up from the next port, bearing in mind that Auckland is a big stopover because it's Christmas, New Year. So they have a reasonable expectation to, catch up. We would let them go. But if the other boat that arrived exactly the same time, day or so after the start, and we had some concerns about their ability to try and keep up in the next Southern Ocean leg, or some concerns about the ability of the crew, or whatever it might be, we may make a completely different decision for the second boat. There's no black and white in the OGR to a degree. There is the notice of race. We follow that, but we look at the facts. You'll usually find if there's a decision to be made, we say after the facts are known. And if it's a critical decision, we will give the entrant an opportunity to give comment. Like if we're going to knock them out of the race, for instance, we'll say, you've got 24 hours to give us due cause why we shouldn't knock you out of the OGR. So they've got a chance to respond to whatever that might be. And then based on their response, we will then make a final decision. So that's more or less how it works, if that makes sense. Okay, Edward, g'day, John. Edward, who from the OGR 2023 team will be physically present in Cape Town? Okay, well, what's happening is Lutz is multifaceted, multidisciplined, multi-skilled, go-getter type of guy. So we keep loading him with things to do. So he's actually going to be part-time for OGR soon, and he'll be managing the Globe 580 Transat. As you probably know, we're running a third round-the-world race called the Mini Globe Race, which will be getting underway at the end of next year. But we've got a Transat on, so we've got 5 or 6 boats starting from, they'll sail from Portugal to Lanzarote in the Canaries. They regroup there, and then Lutz will be doing the safety inspections, checking all the paperwork, all those things in Lanzarote, and then he will manage the fleet across the Atlantic and go over to Antigua where it finishes. So while he's doing all that, we still keep him involved with OGR. So he's a member of the crisis management team. We work remotely and so on. So Lutz is not going to be in Cape Town. And in fact, he won't even be in Auckland. He'll be over in Antigua. We're kicking back probably. But anyway, because he'll be finishing the fleet while we're in Auckland. And then he'll join us in Punta Leste. So then there's Jane. Jane is a variable as well. It's highly likely that Jane won't make it to Cape Town again because there's huge visa issues there at the moment. Trying to get a visa. We've been trying for 3 months. It's a long story. I won't bore you with the details, but Jane's Chinese, of course, and there are some issues there, and it's looking highly unlikely that she will get a visa to go. So Jane won't be there. She'll be working remotely, and we'll work that out. So she'll be supporting me with technology. Don't despair. Then there's Ada will be in Cape Town. She arrives a few days after me. Then Georgie will be there. Jack will be there. Rob is coming down, and Marco's coming as well. Some big sounds in the background there. Something just fell over. So just confirm Marco, Rob, Ada, Georgie, Jack, and me. So that's 6 of us. Lutz will be working remote. And Jane, we'll have to wait and see, but I don't think she's going to get a visa. She's still trying. Okay, so and we've got a group of volunteers in Cape Town as well. We've got some favourite volunteers that were helping us with the GGR, Rian, and a few others. We'll get them together. You'll meet them. We're very grateful for any volunteers we have, and it makes it a lot more fun too. So we've got good local knowledge. And we're hosted at the Yacht Club, and they help us as well. So at the Royal Cape Yacht Club. So all looking forward to Cape Town. A few last-minute panics, but that's fine. John Strickland. Oh, g'day, John. Why is Spirit Helsinki a former entrant in the Cellular Class? A former entrant in the Cellular Class, and not in the and not in the Flyer Class. That's a former entrant in the Whitbread. Right, she's now in Cellular Class and so on. Well, it's pretty simple because, as you probably know, we allow any boats that have entered the first 3 Whitbreads to compete in the Flyer Class. Okay, and in the case of Maiden, she actually competed in the 1984-85 Whitbread. Sorry, no, that's wrong. That's Spirit of Helsinki. Spirit of Helsinki actually entered as Phaser Finland in the 1985 Whitbread. Okay, and so that doesn't rank. It doesn't rank for this edition anyway. You had to be the first 3, but she still ranks in the Cellular Class as well because she's a production boat. So that's why she's in Cellular Class. Come 2027, we are extending the entrant possibilities for Flyer Class out to the 4 original Whitbread races, because we figure most of those designs are reasonably on a par and they're IRC anyway. So in the 27, if Spirit of Helsinki wants to go again, and I hope they do, then she could actually be in Flyer Class, which would be a bit more fun for them. In the case of Maiden, it was a similar situation. Everyone knows that Tracy went round in the 89-90 Whitbread, so it doesn't rank for Flyer Class. But in reality, that boat was entered in the second Whitbread as Distior, I think it was. Yeah, so she ranks under Flyer Class, so she can sail in Flyer Class. I hope all well, John, and thanks for the little trophy you gave me in Southampton. That was cool. Got a Whitbread trophy. Long story. I think they must have found it on eBay and they gave it to me. It's an original long story. Anyway, but it's cool. John, again, since there are no fuel penalties in the OGR, and I'll explain that, in the Golden Globe race, we give a 2-hour time penalty to your speed over the course for every litre of fuel that you use, but there's none in the OGR. We left that. What keeps the entrants from using their engine to power through the doldrums instead of sailing? Oh, that's pretty obvious because it's a sailing race and you're not allowed to. But what we do, which a lot of people may not realise unless you read the notice of race, Mondays is motor day. Right? On Mondays, every Monday of the week, you can run your motor in gear. Doesn't matter where you are and what's happening, but you can do that, but only for a maximum of 15 minutes. And what happens is when you do that, you have to log the exact time that you're starting your motor and exact time you shut off, and usually they'll log their position as well. And there's a very simple reason for that, because it comes back to safety again. There is a real risk that we'll lose a crew member over the side. And if we do, we want everything working to try and recover them. Hopefully they'll stay connected on their safety harness, but you just never know. And there are numerous cases where boats are sailing long distances, like this leg, all the way from England to Cape Town, where they have a folding prop or a feathering prop, and those blades are retracted and never used because the organizer may seal the engine shaft, for instance, so the blades are there. And then all of a sudden, when they need the engine in emergency, they go to turn their engine on and the blades simply will not flick open because for whatever reason, growth or corrosion or whatever, they won't open up to start driving. So we thought about that when we wrote the notice of race. So what the hell, we need to make sure those blades are actually working. So we allow them to run with the in gear for 15 minutes and that's it. And they could use that strategically because they can pick any time during a Monday and, choose the time. And that's a safety thing. But if they use their engine for any other reason, they're in deep cack, deep poo, because you're not allowed to. It's a yacht race. And they would normally, if they're using it, have a reason to use it. Not just cheating, they'd have some other reason wanting to use the engine, and they would log that and they would report that to us, and we would consider the issues and look at the time penalty associated with that. So the reason we didn't put a fuel penalty on this one is because the boats are standard production boats. They need to carry the fuel. We haven't really given them enough time to think about some of the sustainability issues because you've got all these people. You need, ideally you want to use your desalinator. You might need to use your generator to run the desalinator. You've got fridges and freezers because you've got all the systems running, to make it reasonably livable on board. And it's an issue that's up for discussion right now because we will open entry applications for the 2027 OGR very soon because we're inside the 4 years to the start. And I'm just coming to terms when we might do that. I think we may open the applications for an invitation to compete in 27 in January of next year. So only a few months away because I know there's already 9 or 10 teams already out there, and I'm really pretty confident that we may see a full fleet turn up because the fleet will be restricted to 30 boats maximum, and there might be some demand for places. So, and people want to plan well ahead. People are buying boats now, ready for 27. So the issue of sustainability and how we handle that, we're thinking about it. As you know, you can use your old sails and you get a credit on that. If you're using sails older than 8 years, you can actually carry extra of those sails. So there may well be a fuel penalty on the 27 race to try and encourage other ways of thinking for all the boats. So just stand by for that. But for now, there's no restriction on what goes on with the fuel. But you can't motor. It's a sailing race. John, again, any word from GGI Underground? He'll be. I sent him an email, and to give you this one, GGI Underground was this cool guy in Cape Town. During the GGR, he was the master of numbers and statistics, and he would pull the raw data from the tracker, and he would give us all the averages and the highest speed for the week, and who's doing this. It was really quite fascinating. I mean, it was beyond me. I mean, I don't know. It was he obviously did a lot of work with that, and it was everyone enjoyed it. We can't do it. We don't have the technology to do that, or the brain power, or whatever is required. And it did take a lot of work and a lot of effort. It was a lot of fun. And I sent him an email, but I never received a response. He's in Cape Town. I owe him a few beers, so we I've got his number there, and I'll no doubt try and catch up with him again. But maybe he's on holidays, maybe he's not interested, not sure. But it was kind of fun. Okay, hello from Zoe Bess. Hello, Don. I saw that OGR is giving interviews time for school children. How can I book a slot, please? Oh, just send us a message. I'm working with a sailing charity in London and run the Shipmate program. Every week we are following all the boats, their places and achievements and problems encountered. This would be the cherry on the icing. Yeah, we're really keen to promote this. It's sort of very easy for us to do these live sessions like this. And you saw what happened with the school in Norway. It was really good fun. And we've already got a couple of schools already booking in on that. So if you're a school, or someone that's a school, would like to follow the race and then chat, ask questions, not only from me, because I said to Jack, for instance, who's our media person, she's a circumnavigator as well. She sailed around the world with the Clipper feet. with Robert Knox Johnson's Clipper race, which was really cool, and Georgie as well, who is also a yacht master. So that's a woman's perspective, you might say. So there will be opportunities to have any number of people that could hold down an interview like that, and we encourage schools to contact us. So as Zoe just sent us a message, I can give you the email address. In fact, send it to Jack. So it's just JAC at oceangloberace.com. Okay, and Jack will get you in the loop, and we'll do a slot. What we'll probably end up doing is we'll do one school a week for the rest of the voyage, and the rest of the race. So that gives us some opportunities. I know there was an Italian school because Isabel from Translated wanted to do something, so maybe they'll see this and give it a go as well. So we'll see. And good luck with your program there, Zoe. Margaret, g'day, Margaret. This is a long-time follower. I've never met her, but we have lots of conversations. I'd like to know about the interaction of the crew, such as how many are learning to use a sextant, and are there discussions about weather faxes? Oh, I think you mean, and is there a sharing of knowledge and emergency drills? I think you might mean discussing about weather between the boats on the HF chat sessions. So one at a time. I'm only assuming this because I haven't had a discussion with the entrants on this subject, except a few times mentioned on the SoundCloud calls. I would imagine that when there's time on the boat, the navigators are there every day. Sextants out, timepiece, do the calculations, fill out the site reduction forms, do your plotting on the plotting sheets, and so on. And the other crew are watching this, and if their headspace is free and the conditions are good and they don't need to be in their bunk, you can bet your bottom dollar they're watching what's going on. And then from the navigator's perspective, they feel pretty proud. Hey, dude, I'm a navigator. I can use a sextant. Hey, you want to learn? That's human nature as well. So I would suggest that there's a lot of transfer of knowledge, and the crew know they're going to be together for 8 months. So what a perfect opportunity to learn about celestial navigation. Now, if you threw a sextant in my hand now and put me on the back of the boat, I wouldn't have a clue on how to do it because you forget and you get rusty. And the last time I had to do celestial navigation was during my bounty boat expedition across the Pacific in a little rowboat, open boat for 48 days. I lost 18 kilos and we nearly got wiped out a few times, but you forget. And the previous occasion before that was 2010. The previous occasion was 20 years before in the BOC challenge. So it'd take me a day or so to sit down with all the books and get up to speed again. But when you're doing it every day, it becomes second nature, and you'll hear the navigators. I've already heard it. They say, oh, we're a bit rusty at the start of the race, but now we're into it. It's so easy. You just fire them away, bang, 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 every day. So that's going to be great. I'm certain that a lot of the crews who had not known anything about celestial navigation before the start of the OGR, once they're on the water, by the time the race is finished, they'll be navigating. And it's quite a satisfying experience. I was first doing it. I was trained as a celestial navigator when I was 18, South Australian School of Navigation, and we were actually navigating, solving spherical triangles with logarithms, not site reduction tables. We did the whole thing like they did in the square riggers, and you bet that as soon as I finished the course and got my certificate as a navigator, I threw all that away. I bought a book, Mary Blewett's book on celestial navigation, which you can still get today. You'll find a blue cover book, and started to use air navigation tables and site reduction tables and stuff. A lot simpler, a lot easier. But that was when I was 18. It was 55, 65. 65 must have been 71 or 2 or something. Anyway, but it is satisfying, quite fun, and everyone says that. So, okay. And so then about weather faxes. Weather faxes are pretty good when they're working. If the station's transmitting, you get the weather fax. And a lot of people then don't understand what an isobaric map is, where you've actually got the contour lines, barometric, contours, and you don't know what an occluded front is, or you don't know what a warm front is, or you don't know the symbols that are on the chart. So they have to learn that. So there's a bit more to it than just receiving the map. You've got to understand what they mean. And that's covered now. Around the world, they'll get coverage for about half the course. The rest of the time, they're just using their barograph, barometer, and also the high seas weather forecast on the radio. And I'm sure they're all talking about it between the crew. The crew will learn a lot about weather as well. And on the radio, if someone's getting a good fax and your competitors aren't, sometimes the entrants will say, hey, look, this is happening, why not? Just give them a bit of info. That happened a lot in the Gold Globe race. They shared a lot of weather information between each other because a very friendly vibe. And I've heard a few of the entrants talk about that. The chat sessions on the radio are really friendly, and there's a lot of things going on. And is there sharing of knowledge and emergency drills? Yes, there is. There was a fair bit of sharing on. We have a requirement to have what's called a ship safety management plan. So every procedure on the boat associated with every action, everything you do has to be documented, and that process is put in as a document that all the crew can read. So all your man overboard drills, or if you run aground, the processes of who does what, when, where, how, and why is all documented. If there's a fire on board, or all these things. And that was all discussed at length, and they have to do training on that. So, all the crews are up to speed on that as well. Okay, so Andrea, question from the husband, Phil. What sort of position errors are navigators having to deal with using only a sextant for sun and star shots, and how much correction are they having to make over a long period of overcast conditions? Well, there's a few things that answer that question. One is the scenario of basic navigation. Let's assume they're really good navigators and they get a great fix, okay, and they get a cocked hat. It's a small one. That means you've got 3 position lines, and you've got a little gap in the middle. You're somewhere in the middle of that triangle. See those fingers there? You're somewhere just there. And that tells you the likely error, the size of the cocked hat that you've got. And so if that cocked hat is like 3 miles across, your accuracy is probably going to be about plus or minus 1.5 miles, because you're in the middle. Okay, if the cocked hat's 5 miles, it's 2.5 miles out, maybe. And that, to get a cocked hat, you've got to do 3 positions. You've got to do a morning sight, which will give you an angle this way. You've got to do an afternoon sight, which gives you an angle that way, and you've got to do a meridian passage, which gives you a flat line that way. And that's where you get your cocked hat effectively when you run them forward. You have to do a running fix, because if you're traveling on a set course at say 5 knots for 5 hours, that's 25 miles. So you've got to drag that line parallel that way, and that's all navigation. You can learn about that. So that determines your accuracy, and that can be a factor of having a bad time signal to calibrate your watch, or just a bad sight. If it's really rough weather, you're not getting it as accurate as you want to, because when you've got the body that you're observing, whether it's the sun or a star at dawn or dusk, you have to bring that down to the horizon and say this is the horizon along the bottom of the page. If if that's the sun, as you're doing it, you swing your sextant and it comes down in an arc like this. It comes up and down, and it's only if you're measuring the lower limb of the sun there, at that point you go bang, got it. And you say, mark, and you check your watch really quickly, and you got it. And you do that by twisting the sextant like this as you've observed the body of the sun. And so you can imagine if the boat's rocking around and you say, whoa, jeepers, so that affects the accuracy as well. But you get a fix. Then the issue is it's cloudy for a day where you can't get another fix. So you've got to just use your pilot, or not pilots, but you've got to use your DR, directional, DR and your course and speed, and bring that forward. And the more accurate your course is, and the more accurate your speed and log distance is, the more accurate your DR, dead reckoning position, is going to be. But if your log's not working and you have to guess your speed, you might be a bit out. And if it's the same on the second day or the third day or the fourth day, each day your real position versus your DR position could be dramatically different, and you don't know what your real position is. So the accuracy decreases as the number of days go forward, and you've got to make sure you allow for that as well. And that's not including currents. In some places they go to, there'll be huge currents. There could be 2 knots of current. So in a day, that's that's nearly 50 miles if it's going directly one way or the other. So, but the good news is there's not a lot to hit when you're in the ocean on these legs. You leave the coast, you've got to sail through a couple of islands. So if you think your accuracy is down to 5 miles and you're trying to make landfall on the island, you pick the highest island you can, so you can see it from at least 20 miles away. And then if you're 5 miles, you think you're within 5 miles, you're going to see it, and you think it's going to come up there. But then all of a sudden, bingo, it pops up over there. Oh, shit, wasn't meant to be there. I was a bit out. So you got to judge all that. And it's pretty much common sense. When you're a celestial navigator, you'll know, you've got a feel for what's going on, and so on. And in the OGR, just explain this further. At any time, if an entrant decides they're at risk and they need to know where they really are. They're not to look at their GPS. They can actually ring us and express their concern. And we may, as long as we believe that it's not going to give them a competitive advantage, we would consider giving them an accurate answer and giving them their position, because safety is paramount on all of this stuff. And certainly if we see them on the tracker getting into a dangerous situation, we may well send them a message and say, hey, you want to check your navigation or something, because I'm not saying we do that with an obligation, but sometimes we might see something like that, and we can offer some assistance if we know, and they can certainly ask us if they're concerned. Okay. SJ Horn, Godspeed looks like it's on its way again. Yep, she is. What would you, Don, estimate their arrival in Cape Town to be? Oh, boy. They're only just going to make it in time, assuming they don't fall in any further holes. Based on how far behind they are now, they may just get there before the restart. But there's a few big issues there. The two big issues for them, looks like they're going to get a reasonable run down to the doldrums. So then they've got to get through the doldrums, and anything can happen there. It could all go out the window. Then if they take the trade wind route, by that it means going down the east coast of South America and so on, and then turning it about where Tristan da Cunha is and going underneath, trying to go underneath the South Atlantic High. If you're successful with all that and your speeds are really good, that South Atlantic High is actually traveling from west to east, and there's a collision at one point, and you've got to get through the middle of it, and that can be very dicky. If you turn too early, you might drive into the middle of the high if you haven't got a good position of it. And even when you get underneath it, you've got to hope that it works out. It's like a bit of a lottery. If you arrive in the closing stages getting into Cape Town, just as the high is coming across and it squeezes there, you can still then lose another 2 or 3 days sitting in the middle of the high going nowhere. So they have two major obstacles yet to go through, assuming they can stay in the northeasterly trades and get south. But hopefully they'll just make it in time, and then they'll have to wait a few days because you have to stop a minimum of 3 days. We don't just let you touch ground, stay for 6 hours, have a beer and hop on and go. You've got to stay there and recover and get new food on board and things like that. Sun Love Sailing, g'day guys. Hi Don, I'm curious about the IRC rating of Spirit of Helsinki. They're so far in front of the other Cellular Class boats, it almost seems as though their rating isn't correct or fair maybe. As I write this, they're approximately 850 miles in front of the other 3 Cellular Class boats, which are all neck and neck with each other. Thanks. I know what you're saying, but the IRC is the best leveler for sure, so there's no issue there. The certificate should be right. I think what it is, it's a factor of, the rich get richer all the time. When you've got a bigger, faster boat, and that's what they are, they've got a handicap, which should balance out all the other Cellular Class boats. But they get the weather in the front. They've gone down. They've stayed with the other boats because they're a bigger boat physically. So even though they're going to be slowed down a bit by their rating, they've got the better weather. And so the guys at the tail end, and this is pretty obvious in the first week, if they made the right decisions and got going, they were just lucking out with the weather. If you don't get the wind, you're buggered. You can't do anything. You're going to go slow. And I think that's so they're the two factors that have made the big physical difference. The first one is that Spirit of Helsinki is the biggest boat in the class, a big, powerful 651, Swan 651. And then you get crikey, God. I tell you, I've got so many names and numbers. The South African team, right? Okay, I forgot their name of their boat. You get them in a Swan 53 going a lot slower, and they're in different weather conditions, so that it increases the gap. Triana, on the other hand, super competitive. Hot guys on board, no furling gear. They've got the rig as light as they can to give them riding moment, things like that. And they've jumped in the middle there and powered out and got the better weather as well. So that's what happened. So I wouldn't say there's anything strange about it. You're just seeing that interaction between big boats go faster and they get different weather than the smaller boats that go slower physically on the course. And it makes a huge difference. But sometimes with a small hot boat, is what I said today in the tracker, often in these races, the smaller boats can do quite well over the bigger boats on utilising their handicapping. But we'll have to wait and see how that works. Pontus, for the race in 2027, is 47 feet the minimum? There are lots of nice yachts around 44 to 46 feet. What will you say if I show up in a J44 or a Grand Soleil 45 or similar? Okay, J44, no way. It's a different concept of boat. Hot boat, nice boat, but it's not there. The Grand Soleil 45 is a similar style boat to Swan 45 or whatever, but it's just too small. Okay, and so here's what happens. We use the Swan boats as a benchmark boat. That doesn't mean, in fact, it's funny. I got a copy here. Ooh, this is a hot one. This is a hot subject. I got a copy here of the official Swan annual magazine, right? And there's an article in there about the Ocean Globe race, and I've been completely misquoted. I've never owned a Swan before, and they said I've had many Swans, and there's things they said in there from my written responses which are completely wrong. So if you happen to get a copy of that magazine, if you're a Swan owner and you get this, believe me, the things that they've said I said in there are completely wrong. I like Swan, but I'm not commercially minded towards Swan. Okay. Anyway, enough of that. We're still talking about that. So the Norda Swan, because of its history in the Whitbread, and Cellular and some of the others, the 57 was designed for the Whitbread. Okay, it was specifically designed as a round the world racing boat. That's why I love it so much, even though I've never sailed on it. Long story. And so if you've got say a Swan 53, right, and that's the benchmark. And then you put a Grand Soleil 53 alongside it, which is a German Freres one. The Swan 53 is S&S Swan 53, I think it is, yes. You compare the boats. Now, the way we let other designs is that if the parameters, the general parameters, are within approximately 20% of the parameters of the equivalent Swan, then we'll approve the design. So the Grand Soleil 52, which is actually 53 feet long, is fine. It's one of the boats I strongly recommend for the OGR because they're really, like Swans, but the Grand Soleils are pretty much just as good and they're half the price, right? I looked long and hard to find the right Grand Soleil 53, but I couldn't quite pig it in the timelines we had. But the Grand Soleil 53, fantastic boat. If you then, let's say, the Grand Soleil 45, which is a beautiful boat, but it's just simply too small. And so, yes, we have a length limit to get at the speed because we don't want boats to go slow, like the Swan 51, which is not the fastest boat in the world, but a very good boat. And it has the speed to get through. So the Swan 51 is okay. And we allow the Swan 46, which is actually 47 feet 3 inches or something. It's not a 46 at all. And but we did at one stage, there's an interesting story here. The Baltic 46 in the Baltic range of boats was the first boat that Baltic ever built. And initially in the early stage of the race, the family that owned that said, hey, we're going to enter the race. I said, fantastic. And they were going to get Baltic to help with the refit and thing. So what a great story, beautiful boat. So we allowed the Baltic 46, okay, not the 45 you're talking about. And in the end, Baltic ended up doing a deal on that boat. And I'm not sure whether they bought it because it was for sale at one point. And they may have bought it, I'm not sure. But it's their 50th anniversary right now. And so they've done a huge refit back to new condition on their very first boat they ever launched, the Baltic 46. And I was hoping that they'd even think about putting it in the race. But of course, they haven't. It's their show pony now. And people will look at it and think, wow, because Baltic now is a big brand name, a bit like Norta Swan. So, yes, we allow other boats, but only if the general parameters are within 20%. And even that's flexible because you might be within 20%, but we might not like the design because we think it might be too hot, like too fast. Because there was a situation where, believe it or not, a Beneteau 51, the standard, Beneteau 51, entered the Whitbread as La Poste. And it was a hot boat. It was stripped out. It wasn't a production boat. That was one of the early ones they built, and they entered it as La Poste. It did really well, and so we had a few people, and I even looked myself at one stage thinking, we could enter it, but it's just not, for flyer class. If someone came to me with that, it didn't work because it wasn't that one. It was a bit later. But yeah, we wouldn't allow that. In the end, we decided it was a bit too hot to go with the Beneteau 51. It's a particular model of boat. But we've, the hottest one, I've mentioned this a few times, the Oyster Lightwave 48 center cockpit boat. That's a hot IRC boat. We would approve that. It's already approved. Nicholson 55s, there's some Nicholson 48s, bits and pieces. They're all, they would get in. There's a huge number of boats there that we would approve, that are not swans, that you could do the race in. But there is a size limit, and 47 feet is about the minimum that we go with. So if you're thinking about it, get out there and buy the boats before they all get snapped up. Update on Stefan, please. Yeah, he's doing fine. He's completely fine. When he got landed in Madeira, he wanted to get out pretty quick, so he did. Got back into Paris and back home area, and then he's been in the hospital there. I think they closed him up. They didn't want to close the wound straight away in case there was infection when he's in the raft and water and things like that. But I think now he might be stitched up and just recovering. So he's fine. He'll make a full recovery, and it was all a good story in the end. Okay, last question. Hugo, I saw that some boats have Windvanes and others not. Does that give the ones with Windvanes any unfair advantage? No, you'll see the Windvanes are there as an emergency steering only, and boats have also got electric autopilots installed on the boat. But if they use them for whatever reason, it's got to be a serious reason. They log exactly when the Windvane or autopilot is used, turned on, and when it's turned off. It's got to be countersigned by 2 people on the boat in the ship's log. They've then got to notify us, send us a message, say, oh, we use the Windvane or we use the thing, and why. And having assessed the reasons behind that, they may well receive a time penalty. If we think there's any competitive advantage and so on. If it's an emergency steering situation, then we'll look at that as well at the same time. And that gets a bit of a grey area too, because if their steering breaks, then it may be someone who prepared their boat better. The steering hasn't broken. That's an advantage for them. They've prepared better. So someone's steering breaks, they've got to take the rap and go from there. So there's a lot of variables there, but no, you just can't use a Windvane. This is a traditional hand-steered, human-powered race around the world like it always used to be. But we've got a hydrovane on the back of Explorer, for instance, because it's an auxiliary steering system. Once the rudder's on there, you have a little tiller. So if the rudder broke, you could use the hydrovane. Touch wood, hopefully it never does, because we completely renewed everything. New rudder shaft, new bearings, new everything. And then sealed it all up again. We've got the original wires, which we wanted to replace before the start. We're carrying spare wires on the boat, but for whatever reason, too much to do, those wires haven't been changed. They were pretty good. They'd only done about 7,000 miles by my estimate previously, but it's a long way around the world. And the problem now is to fit new wires without stretching them in will mean, if we fitted new wires in Cape Town, and then take off, you can be guaranteed they'll stretch within the first week to 10 days. And then you'd have to crawl down the back while they're underway and try and tension the wires again, which is not so easy. So a bit of a dilemma there. We've already had one boat, Triana, broke her steering cables on the quadrant. So that looks like it's it. So thank you for that. I'm going to quickly go through the comments here just to see if they'll start at the top, see if there's any questions. Hi from Plymouth. Hi, Carol. Good evening from Adelaide. John, are you able to see when they are motoring? No, we can't see, but they got to log it in their ship's log when they turn on for 15 minutes, and we trust them on that. There's a huge amount of honour involved in any yacht racing, and this one more than any, when you're putting in so much effort to get to the start line and do it. There's no point in cheating against yourself. It's not that competitive for a start. I mean, it is. There's a lot at stake, but there's huge effort. So why would you try and fool yourself? And if we find someone that is, the penalties will be severe, believe me. So you definitely need an open mind navigating this way. Yeah, you do. But the thing is, there's not a lot of things to hit anyway. So hi, Desley from Australia. Mitch, so how do navigators know they have currents to incorporate or determine their position? Well, potentially you don't. If you're in the ocean, you can't see it. You could be going sideways and you don't know until you get your necks fixed and you say, wow, we're 20 miles to the left of the course. And that happened to me in the bounty boat trip, that trip that we were doing across the Pacific, 4,000 miles across the Pacific in an open boat, me and 3 other guys. we had Bly's log with us, and he was affected with his navigation. And geez, we were getting the same deal. We had no timepiece, so I could only do meridian passages, which is a east-west position line, and we had the wind and currents, but all the same things that happened to Bly, sailing that course, across the Pacific, over the top of Australia, through the RFUSC to West Timor and stuff. We had so many things that were exactly the same. It was spooky, in fact. Anyway, but you sometimes you can see currents on the surface when you see wind against tide. You get different wave formations, and certainly I know when I'm at sea, I can see areas of current. You can, especially small eddies and stuff, or the wave pattern will change for a period of about 10 miles. You'll get into a spot, and all of a sudden you've got this crazy sea state for about 10 miles, and then often you don't realize it. You sail out of it and it's back to normal. So, wow, there was a current back there. And then you think about it, where the wind is, whether it's wind against tide, or sometimes it flattens out. You say, well, that means the wind's going with the tide or with the current. So you're looking for all these observations, and you can get a gut feeling, but you've just got to allow an error factor. And my very first voyages, I'm digressing here, in my little 29-footer out in the Pacific when I was younger, in the late 70s, in Skye, and I was using a sextant and was going between Noumea and the Loyalty Islands at the back of New Caledonia, and we're trying to find islands that were basically at sea level, and you're looking for the coconut trees because they're going up like 20 meters or something, and they're just not showing up, and you only had to go small distances, but there's huge currents everywhere. So then you have to sort of like, shit, and you have to stop because you have to wait till things are happening and let's say what's going on, and lots of navigation stories. Anyway, so okay, so what's going on here? Mike and Gay, g'day, Mike and Gay. And yeah, from Adelaide, hometown, friends of mine, sailed around the world twice in a concrete boat. And my first boat that I built was a concrete replica of Sir Haley. So concrete's cool. Anyway, Greg Bint, so annoying when editors of magazine get information completely wrong. So unprofessional. Okay. I've been involved with media my entire, for a long, long time, 30, 40 years. What happened in this, I've never seen anything like it in my life. That's all I'll say. And I've written to them and they've given me a response, and I'm quite surprised. But anyway, that's all I should say. I've never seen anything like what happened there. Very disappointing. Because they were written responses and everything was verbatim in the whole thing, all my responses, except for one line. They changed it completely. Anyway, there you go. So yes, due to arriving late. Hello from the okay, you can watch the replay. Some of the boats still having problems receiving HF fax weather. Yeah, there's two answers to that. Yes, some are having problems because their installation might not be as good as it could be, whereas others are receiving really well. And then secondly, even the ones that are receiving really well, the stations start to run out. There's some parts of the world where you don't get any station transmitting HF weather fax. So that's a fact of life. And then you've got to rely on your high seas HF weather forecasting. And there's lots of opportunities to receive that. But again, some radios are better than others. And apparently, so says the surveyor in Plymouth Explorer's got one of the best radios in the fleet, which is encouraging, touch wood. So happy about that. All right, that's enough. So we will see you later. Thanks for listening in, and we'll catch you tomorrow. Bye-bye. Have a good one.